Hey everyone, welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be starting AP Comparative Government Politics Unit 5. We're going to go through 5.1 all the way up to 5.9 in this series, and we're going to finish up the course. So Unit 5 is my favorite unit of the entire course, and it is a massive improvement from Unit 4. Unit 4 puts me to sleep whenever I have to do anything related to it, and I hope that you enjoy this content as well. It is a lot, though. It's very extensive, and I'm sure you are shivering your timbers a little bit looking at the length of this video, whether this is the 5.1 video or the whole Unit 5 lecture video. But don't worry, I think it's really cool, and all of the content is very applicable. We're pretty much just looking at a bunch of case studies of individual situations in the countries. We're focusing a lot less on the individual political systems of the countries, but we're looking at the people in the country and how the economy, how the politics, and the demographics themselves all influence one another. As always, I would like to share that I do have guided notes for this unit. The link is in the description down below. I also have a multiple choice and FRQ practice tests, and there will be a Unit 5 multiple choice review video eventually. And then there's also a list of key terms that you need to know as well. There's also the course and exam description, which is a document that the College Board makes for every single AP class, whether it's chemistry or comparative government and politics. And in these documents, they outline all of the units, what you need to learn in each unit, and they tell you what skills you need to have in each unit, aka how can you apply this content. That's a big part of any AP course, particularly this one, because not only are you going to have to learn the content, but you're going to have to be able to apply it to real world scenarios. And you're going to do that on both the multiple choice and the free response portion of the exam. All right, let's get started. So globalization is kind of the backbone to this entire unit. So globalization includes economic networks that are growing more interconnected. We don't just see standalone economies in individual countries. We can talk and communicate and interact and trade with other countries around the world. And this has created a worldwide market. And these are pretty much unconstrained by political borders. So you can trade with someone in Europe, someone in Asia can trade with someone in Africa. You could grow a crop in South America and then manufacture it in Asia and then sell it in Europe. There's a lot of integration going around here, and as a result we see state control over their individual economies diminishing. They can still exercise monetary and fiscal policy over internal interest rates per se, and government spending, and that can influence their domestic economies, but there's a lot less leeway in how they work with the international market and in their international relations. It's also deepened cross-national connections among workers, goods, and capital. So it's created a need for guest workers. It's caused many to leave their country in pursuit of educational and employment opportunities. We'll learn this as brain drain. So typically we'll see this in like Japan or Nigeria. If we want to look at our specific countries, people will leave Nigeria to go to, let's say, the United States or the United Kingdom, or other technologically and service-based economies in pursuits of educational opportunities, as well as those in the employment sector. And same thing with goods and services. We see goods being produced in certain countries, manufactured in other countries, and sold to other countries as well. It's created supply and distribution chains that are international. And this overall has boosted economic growth at a whole world level. If you're growing something in Africa, you're going to sell that crop to a manufacturer in China. They're going to sell that manufactured product to a service-based entity like a store in North America, and that store is going to sell the crop to you. So all three of those entities are making some sort of profit off of that single good, a single commodity. My phone just went off. And that's going to overall boost the economic growth. All of these GDPs are going to be increasing. But it's also caused economic dependency. If a country is dependent on exporting and trading a certain good or service, and the market value for that good and service goes down, their economy is going to suffer. But if the market price or demand of that good and service goes up and they're making more money, their economy is going to do really well. It's created a more diverse market of goods and services. I like to use agriculture as an example here. We can grow crops in China, and people in Mexico can eat them. And that's a good example. When the Green Revolution occurred in the 20th century, Mexico became a very prominent exporter of corn, and that corn went widespread throughout the world. It is known to have increased Mexico's GDP as exponentially. And it also helped prevent a what's considered to be a worldwide famine. They predicted that before the Green Revolution there would be a worldwide famine, and this contributed to stopping that from occurring. We also see the spread of culture as well through these markets of goods and services. We also have international customers for local businesses. So I can start a business in the United States, and I can have international customers. I can have people traveling here. They could be here for tourists, or they could have moved here. I could also be selling things online. That's a big part of modern-day globalization, is our innovations in communication technologies, particularly the internet. Now, globalization is not always great for local businesses. I do want to emphasize that. We'll look at this some more as we progress through the units. But globalization may cause international businesses, multinational corporations, to develop, and these can hurt local businesses. If I'm let's say I'm a farmer and I am growing corn in Mexico, and I'm selling this corn for 10 pesos. I don't know how much corn goes for in Mexico in the market. And Mexico imports corn from another country, and they sell it for 8 pesos on the market. People are going to buy the imported corn, and that's going to hurt me, a local farmer. So that's just an example for you. It's also caused challenges for regime and cultural stability. With all this culture being exchanged, it's questioned if there's a global culture. It's also changed domestic cultures. So cultures within countries has changed. Like, I remember back in 2020, K-pop was all over the internet. BTS, all over the internet. That became a very fundamental part of international culture, particularly in America and the United Kingdom. I knew a lot of people from the United Kingdom that loved BTS. It's created concerns for domestic industries as they're competing with international corporations that are now prominent at a global level. It's caused economic dependency. It's also caused wealth inequalities. So if certain organizations are taking in all the money, all the profits, that's going to leave certain individuals without those profits, without those incomes. And like I said earlier, it's caused concerns over a homogenous culture as well, as everyone is introduced to the same cultural traits and uses the same cultural traits. I think TikTok's a great example of homogenous culture. What's trending on TikTok is going to be trending in countries around the world. So let's look at our individual countries and see how globalization has affected them. So the United Kingdom is the world's largest net exporter of financial services, and London is a big financial hub. It's because it's home to the London Stock Exchange, which used to be housed in a coffee house. Just so you know, I actually have a short on this if you want to go watch it. And the London Stock Exchange facilitates the trading of global stocks and securities. So it's the world's most international exchange. Big international banks will use London then, because of its financial hub, for large syndicate loans that ultimately go to foreign clients. Anything that's taxed within London is going to be put into the pockets of the United Kingdom government, and that's going to help with increase their government spending. And as we learned in Unit 1, if you increase government spending, you're increasing GDP. So that's something you also got to drill into your head. You may think spending, that's not going to increase GDP. Government spending will increase GDP. London's also a hub for trading currencies and interest rate derivatives. If you have people from around the world buying stocks and securities, they're going to be using different currencies. So if you want to trade, you got to trade your currencies here to invest. And the location also allows traders at the end of the Asian day and the opening of Wall Street to invest and trade. So the time zone is kind of perfect here for these activities to happen. And they also have integration into the global supply chain, which is manufacturing, technology, and automotive sectors for one. I think this is a Nissan. I can't tell what the image is, but there's a lot of big automobile companies being manufactured and the United Kingdom. And this has integrated the United Kingdom into a global supply chain as they receive these parts and then sell the vehicles. All right, so this is more kind of on the London part of the last slide and its role as a financial hub. So this graph shows banks present in the United Kingdom far having higher cross-border exposure. So we're looking at international relations with these banks. I mean, look here at the UK. They're dominating both the liabilities and assets in quarter 1 of 1980 and quarter 2 of 2020, which is a 40-year difference, and they're still at the top. Isn't that miraculous here? All right, let's look at Russia now. So Russia is pretty big in the international arms trade, and I'm not talking about anything about arm wrestles or robotic arms or prosthetics. I'm talking about weapons. They're also a big oil and natural gas exporter. That's like 17% of their GDP. They're also big on coal. That's another one. They're also present in multiple markets due to a variety of goods and services that they sell. They also have big Western cultural influences that are seeping into Russian societies. Harry Potter's a big one. That's kind of big in Russia. And I'm sure some there don't know what to think of it. There's also an emphasis to increase food production and boost incentives for domestic agriculture instead of relying on food imports. And that'll actually help local businesses and local farmers. And there has been economic sanctions placed on Russia by the international community following the annexation of Crimea. So these sanctions were placed kind of as a measure to show Russia that the international community did not agree with their measures in annexing Crimea. So this is a great example of the global influence. So all this community essentially is impacting another part of its community's economy very, very easily, actually. And these sanctions utilize bank restrictions to international financial markets. So they couldn't use, Russian banks cannot use international financial markets. They had to stick domestically. There's also travel bans, so people from Russia weren't able to accessibly travel to other countries to conduct financial means. And there was also currency depreciation, so the value of their currency declined compared to other ones, particularly the U.S. dollar. And let's look at Iran. They also have had sanctions, but these were imposed by the United States and other countries that have limited Iran's access to global markets, just like in Russia. And this has impacted trade and economic development. If you can't trade with certain companies and organizations in other countries, well, your economic development is going to be hindered. Iran is a major oil-producing country, and it's deeply connected to global oil markets. That Middle East region has a ton of oil there. It's a great part of their GDP, but also can cause for commodity dependency, as we discussed earlier. And as I just said, there could be fluctuations in the oil prices. So if the price of oil goes down, Iran's revenue is going to go down as well, and their economic stability is going to go down. So it's going to be more unstable as the oil prices fluctuate. So it goes up and down and up and down. Their economy is going to be very unstable. The country has been seeking foreign capital and expertise and investments in other sectors besides the oil industry. And this is like energy, manufacturing, and technology. And these are efforts to limit their commodity dependence on oil. It's also notable to say that the rise of social media platforms have been integrated into Iran culture. There have been restrictions on them, and there have been times when the government has shut down the internet, but global trends and discussions can be found in Iran. There's also been an increase in tourism, and as of January 11, 2024, there is a do not travel advisory in Iran. But as a whole, tourism has increased in Iran due to a variety of different sites that I have really no idea about because I don't plan to travel there. Let's look at Nigeria. They're a major exporter of oil as well, and their economy is also closely tied to global oil prices and demand. So look at this graph here. We can see this is petroleum consumption. So this is demand. As demand goes up, you're going to be selling more. That's just how it works. Simply the price goes up because more people are going to be willing to pay for more. So we can see here, like let's look at 2018. 2018, 2019, global demand for oil is going up. So Nigeria is probably making a lot of profits, but once 2020 came and COVID shut everything down and people were traveling less and using less gas, the demand went down. Nigeria's economy probably wasn't doing as well, and they were making less profits, and their GDP was going down. It's also very notable to talk about their homogenous culture. As a whole, it's very diverse. There's a lot of different ethnic groups in Nigeria, very, very ethnically diverse. But there have been concerns over the impact of globalization on the smaller minority indigenous cultures, and there being more cultural homogenous character within the country itself, or having more prominent cultures taking hold while the indigenous cultures diminish. And this is particularly due to the English dominance in international businesses. So international businesses taking hold in Nigeria and English being used in interactions and businesses has threatened indigenous language and other practices and markets, for example. So local indigenous markets may be negatively impacted by the emergence and utilization of international businesses and markets. Nigerian agriculture products such as cocoa and rubber are part of global supply chains, and this connects them to international markets. So this kind of welcomes the international markets and international businesses to interact with their countries. There's also been tech startups as well. So this is them integrating into the service industry. And these are examples like Flutterwave, Andela, and Paystack. I've never actually heard of these, but they're actually pretty prominent, and they are real companies and real tech startups. There's also been infrastructure funded by international investors. So these aren't funded by the tax dollars collected domestically. These are funded by international investors, international bodies that are located outside of Nigeria. And the main piece of infrastructure to note is the Lagos Light Rail, which is a railway transportation network. Let's look at Mexico. So there's been economic integration and dependency in Mexico on Canada and the United States. And this is through NAFTA and UMSCA, however you want to say it. NAFTA is no longer in place. That was the North American Free Trade Agreement, and that was curtailed a few years ago. What was put in place in 2020 was the United States-Mexican-Canadian Agreement. And essentially these creates more, not for say open borders and say everyone can travel between the three countries, but more integrated financial systems and trade systems within the countries. There's also been foreign manufacturing plants that are built near the United States and Mexican border. These are called maquiladoras. I hope I said that right. We also have foreign direct investment. I might refer to this as FDI, but these are foreign entities investing in manufacturing, electronics, and automotive industry. So they're relying on these investments. So if these corporations fail, people are going to pull out their investments, and the economy is going to suffer. And BMW is a big automobile one right now in Mexico that's prominent in manufacturing. They also have cities that have become hubs for software development and technology innovation. So this is them expanding into the service industry of the economy as well. But all of these factors have caused for uneven development. The north is more developed and urbanized than the south. So these software developments and tech hubs are going to be located more in the north. Maquiladoras are located in the north because it's closer to the United States. Foreign direct investment is going to be more prominent in the north because investors are going to look at where industry is prosperous, and that's in the north as well. And in these areas, cities are more prominent than in the south. So that's going to make the north way more populous, way more developed, way more urbanized than in the south, which is going to be more rural and less economically developed. There's also been a prominence of e-commerce platforms through the internet, and this has led to businesses reaching a broader market, particularly international. This could be Mexican businesses and non-Mexican businesses as well. Let's look at China. So China is the second largest economy, per se, and they are focused on export-oriented growth. They are the world's factory. Everything that you have, not really, is made in China. It's particularly due to the World Trade Organization allowing it and emphasizing its role in exports. And there's electronics, textiles, and manufacturing that create a global supply chain. And this has led to the expansion of Chinese culture with their prominence. For example, there's been an expansion of Chinese restaurants and celebrity chefs and dishes like dim sum. This is a picture of dim sum. It looks really good. It's like a dumpling, I believe. There's also been Peking opera. I don't know. It's like a form of dance and entertainment in China as well. There's also been rapid urbanization like in Mexico, as well as infrastructure development. And instead of being in the north, it's in the east, closer to the coast, where they can export goods on ships. But there's also been disparities in income and access to healthcare. Healthcare is going to be more prominent where the population is, and that's going to be in the east. So incomes are going to be higher, healthcare is going to be more accessible in the east than in the west, which is more rural and less developed. The Belt and Road Initiative, I just want to include this, has been implemented to enhance trade, economic growth, and cultural exchange as well. And this is a more land-based initiative to expand more in the westward direction to create trade in Afro-Eurasia and economic growth and cultural exchange throughout the entity as well, but also develop more of Western China as well. Like I said earlier, China is the second largest economy. We measure economy size through GDP. This graph shows your GDP growth rate annually in China. So we can see here that the growth rate has remained positive, at least since 2000. It's gone up, though, and then it's gone down. The highest it's reached is a little above 14%, and the lowest is a little above 2% in growth rate. But the kind of stable line we see here is about 8.5%. And in 2020, look at it actually going up and then decreasing. That's kind of interesting to note. All right, we're going to talk about some entities now, starting with the International Monetary Fund. So the International Monetary Fund, its purpose is to be a global monetary corporation. Monetary basically means money, and they are to create a stable money system, a stable international monetary system. So currency isn't just changing every which way every second of the day. It's to promote employment within the country so people can have income and they can have monetary means and financial securities. And it's also to secure financial stability as well within the countries. So facilitate international trade and the use of these currencies and currency exchange for goods and services. So these are some of the big roles of the IMF. And there's also to promote sustainable economic growth, which is obviously the main goal behind it all, is to promote economic growth. You don't want another country's economy to decline. As we said earlier, we are in a very, very integrated global market. So let's say if the economy of China declines, that's going to impact the economies of a lot of other countries as well. All right, let's look at the 1994 Mexico peso crisis, because this deals directly with the International Monetary Fund. So there is a fixed exchange rate with the peso and the U.S. dollar. And this, in combination with rising U.S. interest rates, plus inflation, plus a stressed banking system in Mexico, plus eroding investor confidence, it created a peso crisis. The investor confidence is not thankfully, but it is due to inflation and stressed banking and interest rates in the United States that they rely on. And they're like, no, we're not going to invest here. Look at all these terrible conditions we're in. So this created the peso crisis. And the IMF offered a financial package to stabilize the economy and stabilize the peso in the country. And these included policy measures and structural reforms using fiscal policy, which deals with government spending, monetary policy, which deals with interest rates, and structural adjustments as well. And there were goals to increase economic competition, improve governance and spending, because if you increase spending, you'll increase GDP, attract investment as well, bring back those investors that they eroded before, and also control those inflation rates. You don't want inflation rates to fluctuate that much. You want the economy to be relatively stable, so loans are taking out at the same interest rates for extended periods of time. And this ultimately did lead to stability, so it kind of did work. So this is an example of the IMF in action. Now let's talk about the World Trade Organization. So the World Trade Organization is, as in its name, it helps develop the rules of trade and facilitate trade. So it goes smoothly, freely, and efficiently. It'll increase access to easy global trade. So if people put in unnecessary conditions, the World Trade Organization is like, no, you can't do that. Let them trade with you. Don't you want to increase your economy? That's, the big goal. They also want to promote intellectual property protection. They don't want to be like, I never talk like that, but they don't want to go to a country and state that they have to trade. So you can refuse trade or you can demand more, but World Trade Organizations, they always say you don't have to give it up, and another country can't make you give it up as well. Now, it's also important to note that Iran is not a member, so their trading might be a little more unorthodox than in other countries. Here's a graph, a chart, if you want to call it that, of the per capita GDP since joining the World Trade Organization for but 3 countries here. So China, Mexico, and Nigeria. And we can see here that in all 3 of these countries, GDP per capita has grown exponentially in these countries as well. And there are kind of recently new members too. Nigeria and Mexico in 1995, and China in 2001. So we can see here, I mean, look at China, it's grown like 8 times the amount in 16 years. That's magnificent. In Mexico, it's about 2.5 in 22 years. And then in Nigeria, it's about 8 or 9 times the amount in 22 years as well. Nigeria has acquired technical assistance and capacity building programs through the World Trade Organization, and this allows them to participate effectively in trade negotiations to sell and import products, as well as implement trade-related policies such as custom duties and navigate the complexities of international trade, because it's a pretty big and competitive business. Assistance may be provided to Russia in implementing trade facilitation measures, such as the establishment of single window systems to streamline documentation processes, make sure there's transparency, reduce bureaucratic hurdles so the government can't get as involved, and enhance the efficiency of cross-border trade. Because trading in Russia right now is a little more challenging than trading, for say, in Mexico. The government has a bigger role in that, and the World Trade Organization is trying to find ways to make the trade more smooth and decreases this government role and dependency. And let's look at the World Bank. This is our last organization. The World Bank provides technical and financial assistance in order to reduce poverty and support economic development, to raise standards of living. They have been involved in Iran's energy sector. So Iran is a part of the World Bank. They've been supporting Iran's energy sector, and they've been through financial projects related to renewable energy, particularly like green energy, energy efficiency, and infrastructure development, because you need infrastructure development to support the energy. These projects have been related to, in Russia, these projects have been related to transportation, as well as roads and railways, because transportation networks have been desperately needed in Russia, especially in their urban areas. In Nigeria, we've seen the World Bank's support on initiatives to enhance basic education and teacher training and infrastructure in Nigerian schools. So they can get pretty local and personal in their support as well. And in China, we've seen support for Chinese infrastructure similar to that in Iran and Russia. Is building roads, irrigation systems, because agriculture is a big part of China still, and rural electrification, because believe it or not, rural areas in China commonly do not have electricity. So the World Bank has been helping provide electricity to rural areas. Urban areas, though, they have it pretty well. Also, a concept that you need to drain your head, drill, whatever you want to call it. Drill into your head. You need to know this. That's what I mean. It's called economic liberalization. All right? So it's also kind of considered as neoliberalism. We're going to discuss it. So in China and Nigeria, they've acted economic liberalization policies, and a majority of respondents in recent studies have said that they expect children in their countries to be better off than their parents, which means they think that the economy is growing and their children are going to make more incomes, be able to support themselves in an area, in a place, a country with a higher standard of living. So what is neoliberalism? Neoliberalism, economic liberalization, is when you remove government intervention in trade, which is something that the World Bank's trying to do in Russia, and they're trying to eliminate government intervention in trade, investment, not World Bank, World Trade Organization, and other movements of capital. So they're moving it from the public, which is government, to the private, which is the individual sector. So this is essentially a promotion of capitalism. And capitalism, for the most part, makes trade a lot more easier, because you're going to remove tariffs, which are taxes on imports. Nobody wants to pay those, so they're not going to trade with countries with tariffs, as well as utilizing free trade agreements. So, for example, in Mexico and part of neoliberal policies, the number of people in the middle class has grown with this increased standard of living. There's been job creation and skill development with a rising economy. We can measure this, of course, with GDP. GDP, the measure of the economy size. So all of these factors are considered parts of economic liberalization, when the government is taking a smaller role in the economy over the individuals, the producers, and the consumers. Now, there are challenges that come about due to neoliberalism and globalization. They kind of go hand in hand. There's been increased demands placed on governments by civil society groups, particularly for privatization and more consumer role in the economy. So, for example, in the United Kingdom, there was the Extinction Rebellion that has been demanding for more robust government action on climate change and environmental policies. So this is particularly due to globalization, less so of neoliberalism, because globalization has caused environmental change and a lot of environmental consequences. So in the UK, where globalization is very prominent because it's very developed, this Extinction Rebellion occurred to call for action on climate change. There's been protests by students and disenfranchised groups. So, for example, in Nigeria, the End SARS movement was promoted globally to diminish police brutality. There's been the arrest of protesters and the imposition of social media restrictions, particularly in our authoritarian regimes. So, for example, in Iran, an authoritarian regime, they developed the NIN, so the government can control and monitor online activities more closely, monitor what is accessed from other areas across the globe. It's designed to be a more controlled and censored alternative to the global internet. So this is a response to the global internet being used in Iran. They're kind of like, we're going to modify this a little bit. There's also been in the empowerment of one's marginal, which means kind of like small, nationalist, populist groups that blame the government for changes in culture and economic conditions. So they blame the government themselves for allowing globalization to get to where it was. So, for example, in Mexico, economic inequality and corruption have fueled the empowerment of populist movements and nationalist sentiments in the country as well. So they're like, yeah, we don't agree with this. So we want the country to be a nation with less corruption and inequalities, which sounds like a normal thing to me. So the 1994 Zapatista uprisings. We're doing a little more history. We're really focusing on 1994, though. So the Zapatista uprising occurred in the southern state of Chiapas in Mexico in response to decades of political, social, and economic marginalization of the indigenous community. So they basically said, you don't think we're important. So we're going to rebel. We're going to want autonomy. We want to have control and not be ignored and not addressed by the national government. It was a pretty interesting event. So the Zapatista group desired land reforms, indigenous rights, political power. They wanted greater autonomy, essentially. They wanted more devolution. And they also critiqued neoliberal policies that caused economic inequalities in Mexico. And the uprising actually occurred on the same day that NAFTA went into effect. And it displayed a resistance to globalization, because globalization and NAFTA go hand in hand, and the local impacts that it would have in hurting domestic businesses and economic development in the South. And it would also increase commodity prices. If you have goods and services being traded from other countries, it might be at an increased price because you got to transport them. And these methods went from military to repression to grassroots participation and gaining international support. So they went through a lot of steps. And inevitably, globalization kind of helped them because they got the international support. It didn't do that much, though. It did stuff, but it didn't do as much as they probably wanted it to. So let's look at Boko Haram, which is in Nigeria. So Islamic culture in the north is very prominent compared to the Christian culture in the south of Nigeria. And a terrorist group emerged in the early 2000s. That's Boko Haram, and they're concentrated in the north, where Islamic's popular. They have aims to establish an Islamic state in Nigeria, and this is created due to the religious tensions there throughout the different religious groups. And globalization has fueled their use of social media and technology and media as a form of propaganda, recruitment, and transfer information to kind of share their perspective and overall influence other people so they agree with it. And globalization has also provided means of financing for them. People have invested in Boko Haram because they have agreed with their cause, or they think they agree with their cause. And they've also used money laundering domestically and abroad using the internet. So they're kind of using the internet for disadvantages to others. And there's been international efforts, not just in Nigeria, but internationally, through joint military operations and diplomatic operations to challenge and respond and inevitably shut down Boko Haram and their terrorism. Let's talk about multinational corporations. This is the last part of topic 5.1. I told you there's a lot. So MNCs, which are multinational corporations, have grown tremendously in a globalized world. They dominate global markets, and they also can pose challenges. So what is an MNC really? An MNC is just a corporation that's present in more than one country, like Coca-Cola, for example. Apple is an MNC. They've caused challenges over labor, where labor is located, how much it costs, the ethics behind labor. So are they hiring a source that uses child labor? Nestle. So there's a lot of ethics regarding that because, for example, in Nestle's case, Nestle didn't go out and directly hire children, but they utilized another organization that uses child labor. There's also the environment and the methods used to create the materials, like getting silicon for technology, or lithium for lithium batteries used in Tesla. Lithium mining is very dangerous and really bad for the environment. There's also land rights over who gets what land and who gets to use different facilities as well. There's also taxation. If you have an international corporation, they're going to be taxed in all these different countries that they're located in. And those can be different at a country by country basis, and even a regional by regional basis within the country as well. They may not agree with the tax measures, so they may pull out, or they like them so much they're going to become way more prominent than, let's say, they were in another country. And there's also concerns over budgets and how much money they have compared to a local corporation. The MNCs are probably going to have a higher budget because they're more prominent, so they may be able to overtake them and predominate a local community and the businesses. Thanks so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. It's free, which means it costs $0, and it really does help me out. Leave a comment down below with any questions. I'll be happy to answer them. There's some links down below in the description with practice tests, key terms, guided notes, all that fun stuff. Head on over to the next AP Comparative video on some really cool political stuff.